Hello and welcome to Laying Down the Lore Mental Health Awareness Week Special. Are you mad as a box of frogs? Is your anxiety leading you to hear more voices in your head than the usual 7? And are you plotting to poop in your neighbour's chimney to soothe your rage? If so, you're in good company. So instead of separating our ghouls from our goblins, our snotlings from our skaven storm fiends, and our bloodthirsters from our bloodletters, we're going to ask, what's up with this mental health stuff? My name is Ben Crone Barber, and I'm an absolute loon. With me is my co-host Christopher Crowlin Allen.
Hello there.
Who is also clearly quite unstable.
Possibly.
And my dear brother Darren.
Brace yourselves.
Who knows so much about the inner workings of his neighbour's chimney we fear the worst. After recording together for years, we've become acutely aware of each other's state of mind, and this episode is an attempt to get our cards on the table.
Hey, listen, I told you that chimney thing in confidence.
This is why we have trust issues.
And I'm telling the public in confidence.
And I believe the technical phrase is sounding. So just let me be.
What, that's the technical phrase for pooping in a chimney?
No, that's where you put a chopstick-sized vibrator down your urethra.
Wow. That is... Well, I feel like we've really set the tone for this episode.
Cures depression like that.
So, we are celebrating International Mental Health Awareness Week.
Way! Right on. Right on.
And why are we doing this?
Because
Patreon numbers are down.
Because we like the challenge that Darren brings us doing these shows.
Yes.
And also, I think it's important to acknowledge these, be aware of it, and openly discuss it and see how we manage it, and hopefully we can help a few souls along the way, right?
Yeah.
And not be ashamed of anything. I mean, we play with toy soldiers, that's shameful enough. We've got the shame covered. We don't need to worry about this stuff. We can just
This is about shedding the excess shame.
That's it, exactly.
I've been trying to do that for months.
Because Dar, you started a room.
You were the first one that was crazy. So,
Yeah.
So Darren, back in North Berwick where you invented depression.
were people depressed in the black and white times?
Well, you started a room, didn't you, on Discord, which has become quite popular.
Yeah, I have an ongoing mental health saga, which is just exhausting. And so I'm tired of having to mask, I believe is the technical phrase, among our neurodivergent friends. So I just created a room and said, anyone who wants to talk about mental health can do so here if they're feeling good, if they're feeling bad, if they've got challenges. And the only real rules are you can't offer advice, because that's not how speaking therapy works, how talking therapy works. But you can acknowledge someone's struggle, you can empathize with someone's struggle and encourage them to, try and push through, which is really all we can do. Well, unless we're doctors, in which case you write yourself a load of prescriptions.
From my observation, it's one of the most active rooms there is. I mean, not the most active, but it's been people are very willing to engage in it. And I've got a lot from it as well, which shows to me that talking about it is massively helpful. Helpful.
Hugely.
I think it's the relatability of it. It's people are able to relate to it, yeah.
The thing I love about it is the fact that it seems to have brought the community closer together as well. Because every time somebody, is vulnerable and shares, some stuff in that room that they maybe wouldn't share normally, it gives other people the opportunity to do the same. And that's only ever going to bring people closer together. So you start to, a lot of the guys and girls on our server, we've never met in person. In fact, all but one, I think. Oh no, and Doug as well. We know we've met 2.
And us 3.
But there's so we've not met the third one. But But you feel like you get to know them.
Brace yourselves,
well, especially when they're sharing that vulnerable stuff.
But that anonymity helps as well, because it makes it easier for people to talk about issues without having any kind of, this crowd of people don't have an impact in my day-to-day life, but I know they're there, and if I'm feeling a bit low, true. They can. I know I can get a boost.
I don't know how that's gonna.
Other snacks are available.
Unfortunately, anonymity is not going to be something that we're going to be able to use during this conversation. But
speak for yourself, mate. This is a wig.
Oh, that funny glass and nose thing that you've got going on is one of those fake throwaway ones.
That's a condition, you fucker.
This is all Darren.
Right. So, I mean, as I'm sure you both know, our listeners listen to this show with, and think of us in, with awe and amazement.
Well, more really,
he said modestly.
Yeah, but really, we're human, just like you. So I thought it might be a good place to start with the madness, the fucking craziness. So I've got a few questions I'm going to fire at you. And I
like how we're straight away using clinical terms.
What questions?
Yeah. No, madness.
The loon.
Madness, yeah.
When did you first realize you were completely tonto?
Does one ever realize they're completely tonto?
No, that's what makes them tonto.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so let's what kind of mental health issues have you guys been dealing with recently? Dar, you go first.
Oh, wow.
Okay, Crow, listen, all three of us are sitting on a treasure trove of shit, all right? So pick somebody.
All I've got from that is Ben wants to see how honest the other two of us are going to be to gauge how honest he's going to be.
Let's get vulnerable, but let's not get too vulnerable, right? No.
But you first.
Sorry, people.
Okay, so as the oldest, I'll go first.
I'll go for it, bro.
Excellent.
I'm fine, yeah.
Sweet.
Denial.
Stubbed my toe the other day, but fine after that. Yeah. I'd say something I've come to understand is I was born with clinical depression. So that's where your brain doesn't produce the correct balance of chemicals. And so my reactions to external stimuli are not in line with other people's reactions to external stimuli. And my brain spirals into a kind of negativity all the way down. And so it gets real bad about once every 6 months and gets extremely bad to the point where hospitalization is discussed about once every 2.5-3 years.
Wow.
But I'm on new meds. I was on new meds just in November, and they're aces. Yeah. They make me almost normal. I mean, that's a stretch, but...
Is that something... Do you have to take those every day? Is that...
Yeah, for the rest of my life, yeah.
For the rest of their life.
So I've been medicated. So I was diagnosed in the year 2000 and did the usual thing that people with kind of more clinical rather than transitory, although there's no joke in either of those, or more chronic conditions, where I went on them, I felt better, I came off because they were a source of shame. Then I felt worse, and then I went back on them with a sense of shame, and I felt better, and then I went off them because I felt better, and then I did that for 10 years. Yeah, it all kind of understanding that I couldn't fuck around with the medicine and I had to stick to the regimen came about. Well, it started when Sam really was on the way, my son. So 16 years now.
Sorry, that's that up.
Yeah, I realized I couldn't. Yeah, I realized I couldn't keep doing that. I had to buckle down, and it wasn't perfect, and I dipped quite a few times, but better than I was. And now it's I religiously take them of an evening. Because the ones I'm on, if you take them in 10 minutes, you are fast asleep. So I'm actually suspect that Vic may have contacted the doctor and they've given me some sort of Rohypnol. That's what I'm actually taking.
If it works, it works, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's one of those things. It works for other people. It works for everyone else, which is an important note. And I'm sure we'll cover this later on, is I knew what was happening, but I didn't deal with it, which meant everyone else had to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when did you first notice it? Well, you said that you could clinical depression.
Probably about 98, 99. So my late 20s. How old were you then? I was 28, 29. No, was I? Hang on. 27-ish, yeah.
Right. But it was something you'd lived with all your life and hadn't realised what it was. Only, in the late 90s, was it like, okay, something is different in me that needs to be addressed? It was at that point you thought action needed to be taken.
And I think it's that because, I entered into school in the 70s. Well, imagine that.
Blimey.
You don't have to. You can see me. But like mental health was, this person's normal, this person's stupid. That's what mental health was.
Yeah.
So, So I struggled with a lot of self-worth and all this other, why am I the way I am? Why can't I just be normal?
Right.
What is everyone else doing that I'm not doing? What do they have that I don't in terms of a capacity to deal with stuff? And because I did just turn my back on it, like pure denial, everyone else had to deal with all of my fuck-ups.
And those questions you asked yourself and whatnot, I guess people still do that today, but there is the help, isn't there, and the understanding and the acknowledgement by the wider community of, okay, this needs treating, this is a condition, this is whatever you want to kind of call it. Whereas before, that must have been very tough back in the day. People
tend to ask more questions before they write you off now.
Yeah, sure.
Which is kind of nice.
So, I mean, it's, to kind of, I guess, say what Chris has just said in another way, do you think that the point at which you started to recognize it as a mental health issue was in part to do with a shift in kind of societal acceptance around mental health, or is it societal acknowledgement around mental health?
No, it was more to do with my understanding that it couldn't continue this way.
Right, okay.
You know what I mean? So it's a lot like, it's, the kind of universal truth is you can't help anyone that doesn't want to be helped. I didn't want to be helped. I felt I didn't need to be helped because I was able to, from leaving home in late teens and then until, Sam came around, my son, I moved to a city. I had a good life because I was a charming white man who could talk a lot and so got quite good jobs. But I would destroy my friend circle and my social life within 4 years. So I'd move to another city and then another city and then another city. It's exhausting.
Right. Wow.
But you can only do that in your 20s.
Yeah. That was not sustainable.
Yeah, not at all.
So, I mean, what kind of impact then did it have on things like, work, relationships, physical health, kind of life in general?
Physical health has always been an issue because people with clinical depression and other mental health issues are available. They tend to, because of self-loathing, they don't tend to look after themselves. So hygiene was an issue. Diet was an issue. Borderline alcoholism was an issue. Gambling, thankfully, was never a fucking issue. My thing expressed itself as an absolute need to control every aspect of my life and anyone else's life who touched my life. And so in turn, it made me a very good project manager. But, there's always a cap certainly in telecoms company in terms of personal interaction. If you're a good communicator, but you do it in a certain way that's manipulative, there's a cap on how high you can be promoted because you burn too many bridges.
That's so interesting, especially that I didn't know that thing of the need for control with you, because that makes sense, because you're very good at pointing it out in me when I kind of flip into that mindset, which I can be guilty of doing. So that's that is interesting.
So was the controlling thing, was that a symptom of the depression? Did they go hand in hand, or was that just they're kind of two separate two things, which character features of yourself? Or was that the depression kicking in, or was that how you were handling the depression?
It was described to me once I got into therapy and started, taking it seriously and working through the issues. It was described as the actions of anyone who's in crisis. So it's not just depression; it's anyone else who feels their life is wildly out of control, or they have no control over their lives. It's like the thrashing of a drowning person. It's they're desperately trying to get their head above water, because they don't have the internal capacity to solve their own problem.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Wow. And work that, but you said like with work you were pretty on it.
Because the boundaries in work are fairly strict. Well, they were at that time. I know that a lot of people approach work as a thing where you're in amongst friends. It's more collegial in this day and age than it used to be, which I think, that is good, but comes with a lot of its own problems, because
100%.
How do you differentiate between work life and private life?
Yeah, I completely relate to that. I massively relate to that.
So you can be friendly with someone in the office, but they're not your friends.
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. And nor should they be.
Yeah. I ran into a lot of problems of that, which stopped about 3 years ago, but I kept on, especially when it was, it was especially confusing when it was, when hierarchy was involved, when I started making friends out of people that were actually my bosses, because I would never, they would flip from one mode to the other and I wouldn't get the memo. And suddenly I'm left feelings of rejection and kind of constant fear that, you were going to trigger them in some way. And exactly as you just described, I suddenly realized, actually, I can be friendly with these people, but while I'm working with them, they're not my friends. And, it felt like a difficult thing to put into place. It felt quite cold, but actually the impact overall was enormously beneficial. I massively relate to that.
I mean, and obviously for the past 3 years in our interactions, it's clear Chris doesn't have a problem with that.
Mate,
you know what I mean?
There are clearly defined lines.
Exactly. We do not talk outside of these. Like, all communication outside of these recordings is email based.
Exactly, and very formal.
It's very formal.
Yeah. Moving forward, I trust that you will. Yada.
I'm tired of getting emails from Chris titled "To whom it may concern."
Yes.
Darren, I am writing this email to let you know. Speaking of which, Crowl, how's the head today, mate? What's going on?
Mate, today I am in a better place. So very recently, currently, I am dealing with almost crippling anxiety, which is related to moving house. Well, I should say I've been suffering from anxiety for many years in the form of indecisiveness, self-doubt, but it has come to a head in the past few weeks since moving home to a level that I've never experienced before. Yeah, it's been enlightening. It's been scary, but also quite positive in many ways. I've discovered a lot about myself. But yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks dealing with anxiety and coming to terms with the reality of my mental state, which in the past has been quite funny. My indecisiveness, we joke about it on the show. My lack of commitment, my, in our chats, in our friends groups, Crowl, always the one who wants to have a foot in the door. He needs his options. He needs an escape route. And that has been something that I've acknowledged is a problem. Options, decisiveness has been something I really need to address. Yeah. So anxiety, I think I haven't been formally diagnosed with it or anything, but that's what I would confidently call it, anxiety.
So what's that experience been like? I mean, what's your experience of anxiety been over the past few weeks?
Over the past few weeks, so irrational thoughts, and basically role-playing situations in my head, which may or may not come true, but the point is not happening yet. I am reenacting or role-playing these scenarios in my head and trying to control every single outcome, trying to predict every single outcome and prepare for every single outcome. And in the process, get carried away emotionally. So I might decide that, okay, I'm not happy with this situation. Well, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to get angry about it. Well, and then you're going to get angry at this person, and then you're going to do that. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of in this situation where I'm angry for no reason for a situation that hasn't happened. And yeah, the feelings have been fear, regrets of the choices that I've made. Have I made the right choice? And how do I get out of it? What are my options to make sure that I have the most risk-free outcome I can from this? And again, over the years, on reflection, I've done this, whether it's choosing which sandwich I want to have from the sandwich shop or something like that, to higher risk situations like, buying a house, which we all know is a risk. It comes with its own risks and whatnot. But
only those two situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sandwiches,
you know what I mean? Yeah. Whether I should end this person or not, easy. You know what I mean? But sandwiches, oh boy, that gets me sweating. Would
you describe the scenario things as catastrophizing?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And I do that all the time.
Locking onto the negatives of a situation, which aren't, relatively speaking, aren't even that negative, to be honest. But I will then carry that to the next level and go, right, well, this is the next thing that's going to happen because of this small negative thing. And then that's going to happen. And all of a sudden, my house is going to fall down.
Yeah.
Like that, for me, that is the natural way. I'm not saying it's the right way, but it is the way that my brain is thinking about things, it's crippling. It's crippling, and just wanting to be able to get out of that. But yeah, as I'm sure we'll move on to, I've thankfully had a lot of good support and advice from various areas to try and deal with it. And so, the anxiety is definitely there, and now it's a case of how to manage it.
It's funny that you say,
which I'm learning.
It's certainly over the time that I've known you, as you said, that indecisiveness, your anxiety has never really kind of presented itself in a recognizable form, to your friends and family until now, obviously. But it's always been a kind of point of
hilarity,
humor, hasn't it? Yeah, exactly.
And I've always owned it, and that's the thing. I've always been aware of it. I've never been in denial about it, and it's been quite funny,
Yeah. But it's fun. Is the buying the house thing the thing that's have you experienced it kind of ramp up in recent years relating to other stuff, or is it really just this is the straw that's kind of breaking the camel's back?
I think this is the most I've ever felt this level of anxiety, but I have had a couple of, should we call it, episodes in the past. A couple of years ago, I can't remember what it was related to, but that resulted in me admitting defeat and having my first course of therapy to address it,
Right.
and which was very helpful. But this situation of buying the house has highlighted that there is still an underlying trauma, should we call it, that needs to be addressed, which I'm very much looking forward to addressing as well.
Nice. And like I said, Dara, what's certainly with regards to the experiences that you've had over the last few weeks while it's been really bad, like what's that been like while trying to deal with things like work and your relationship with your partner? And
sure, yeah,
I think we can call her Amy now. I think we've mentioned her enough on the show.
Indeed,
with
yeah,
Amy, and
Amy's the fourth member at this point. Yeah, no, sorry, Friday's the fourth, Amy's the fifth. Yeah, so various levels. Work, it's been distracting, but not been detrimental to work. In fact, work has been a welcome distraction from the anxiety. But, I can't ignore my anxiousness, and it's slowed me up a bit. Do you know what I mean? Whereas before I might bosh through X amount of projects in a day or a week, it might slow me down just because it's been my mind has wandered or something like that. But it's not been too bad. Relationships, that's probably been the hardest hit. Amy has and is doing her best to support me, but it's taken a toll on her as well. Least of all because she's got her own stuff to deal with too. You know, she's under pressure from work and various other parts of life. So yeah, that has been quite taxing on the both of us, but I'm thankful to say that we've both worked through it, and as of now we're in a good place. So yeah, the relationship side of things has suffered the most. Physical, again, not so bad, as Darren said, and I can agree. It is hard to motivate yourself to take care of yourself when you're in a certain state, you know. But actually, I've been quite militant with myself. I've been quite active for the past 10, 20 years, training and running and whatever anyway. So it's part of my routine. And actually, I forced myself to keep up with the routine because I know it is good for me. So yeah, thankful to say I haven't suffered any physical ailments from it, and my physical welfare hasn't suffered. In fact, like I say, I know, I'm well aware it does benefit mental health. So I've been making a point of make it happen. Do you know what I mean? Well, just make time for it.
Yeah. When you have these episodes, you know, when you have that kind of thought that then triggers and leads you down that road, do you feel a physical effect from it? Like, do you get like an adrenaline rush, or you know what's kind of going on physically while you're having these anxious thoughts?
Yeah, so I think adrenaline, definitely, it gets me going, and then that adrenaline feeds the anxiety to go further and further down this catastrophizing. You know, it gets the blood pumping. Happened this morning with work. Actually, it was nice to be anxious about work today rather than the house. You know what I mean? So that's anxiety and pressure I can deal with, and that actually I use that. Do you know what I mean? To get shit done, bizarrely, which is a funny spin on it. But yeah, I woke up at 4 this morning, and I'm working on a project, and I decided, I've missed a couple of details in the project. So yeah, I was starting again doing the role playing thing, and yeah, I've been up since 4 just thinking about work. And then of course with all these things, you know, when you're anxious and anxiety and basically you're being irrational essentially, later in the morning I had a chat with some of my associates who I'm working with on the project, and everything that I wouldn't say worried about, that just needed addressing, I was like, that's missed, I need to do it. Wasn't a problem at all.
Yeah.
It was absolutely fine. And I was prepared. I was like, right, okay, today I'm going to address this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that and do that. Doesn't need doing at all. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that is a regular thing that happens. What I've realized with anxiety is that things get blown out of proportion, and you don't need to worry. Not always. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's valid and you're like, that does need addressing. But literally 99% of the time, you know, because the anxiety blows things well out of proportion, and the end result is it's not a problem. It's not even a problem. Yeah, it's rarely ever a problem. You know.
Yeah, it's funny you'd say that. The thing about adrenaline, like years ago, I went through a period of having quite serious panic attacks, but they weren't the ones that if somebody had said to me a panic attack back then, I would have imagined something kind of Hollywood where you're hyperventilating, kind of physically wigging out, you know. Actually, all it was a single thought that triggered a cascade of other thoughts, like a chain reaction. And my physical reaction to that was adrenaline. I would have this massive adrenaline rush. And I'm sitting there kind of going like talking my way out of it, talking myself down. And when eventually my mind simmers down, the adrenaline starts to leave my body. And then I'm just exhausted. Like I just feel weak and drained. And actually what it then meant was, I would then be more susceptible to it happening again later in that day. And the worst thing was that the time that it happened the most was the moment I opened my eyes when I woke up.
Yeah.
And so that just set the precedent for the day.
Oh my God. I'm sorry to laugh, but I've just got a vision of you lying in bed going, not reality again.
Yeah, exactly. That was it. Every morning I was like, for fuck's sake. But like you, I ended up going and getting a couple of courses of CBT, and the thing that really helped, I mean, I know we'll come on to the solution in a bit, but the thing that really helped was being able to go, I've been here before and it didn't kill me.
Yeah.
And suddenly that understanding started to kind of permeate through those experiences. It was like, well, this is nothing. Like, this is just a fucking brain fart, it's gonna go. And so over time it just diminished until it disappeared, which was a grace. But yeah, it's when you're in it, man, it's horrible. It really is.
Absolutely.
No, it's just wanted to touch on a couple of points. There's the first is the best description I ever heard of a panic attack, what it feels like to have a panic attack. Because you really, unless you have a panic attack, you don't know. I could describe. It's like trying to describe a new color to someone. They just don't get it.
Yeah.
But it feels like a Catherine wheel in the middle of your chest that slowly turns into a black hole. In terms of energy and emotion, it just
all consuming
straight in. The other point in terms of the catastrophization, the things that helped me, one was to put in a framework, which was, can I do something about it? If I can, then I will. If I can't, then why am I worried about it? And then the next one was, that thing I can do, can I do it right now, or do I have to wait? And if you have to wait, then it's fine. You're going to do it later. Now, that's easy to say while you've got the black hole in your chest.
Exactly. Indeed.
But it says, and it's like the advice, the unsolicited advice I give to people who are going to be parents is that none of it is hard. None of it is hard. You're just exhausted for a year. That's it. That's why it's so difficult. You're exhausted.
And tiredness is fucking enemy number one for me, man. It brings out all of the gribblies.
So Ben, can we spin it around? Your turn, bro. Passing you the cushion of vulnerability.
Go on.
The something of someone.
If you just turn your chair slightly so we can see your plastic bonsai tree, which is not at all a metaphor for your life.
That's Lego, all right?
Exactly, plastic bonsai tree.
That. My sister bought me that. What have I been dealing with recently? For the most part, at the moment, my state of mind is actually pretty good. I am dealing with, as Darren mentioned earlier, one of my core defects is a need for control. And while I have become a lot better at dealing with that in recent years, the biggest area the area of my life that it manifests in now is my schedule and things that I want to achieve. And I've recently started dating somebody, and I want to make time for this person. And what I'm realizing is that, having spent a large part of recent years single, I've filled every moment of the day. There's always something to do. And because I'm having increasingly less time, my brain is just constantly panicking, going like, how the fuck are you going to fit all of this in? How the fuck are you going to fit all of this in? That then leads me down, a route similar to what you were describing, Kral, one of kind of anxiety and ultimately, if it's sustained for long enough, despair. But the core root of most of my issues is that I am an addict. I'm in recovery. I was just checking my little app. I am 4 years, 2 months, and 27 days clean of drugs and alcohol. Thank you very much. And that's been fucking roller coaster of a ride. I mean, my life really did fall apart. My addiction brought me to my knees about 5 years ago. In fact, it was a holiday in Croatia with Kral and with Amy.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. Yeah. It was Kral's fault. He pushed me over the fucking edge.
The catalyst, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm not even sorry.
It was a fucking great holiday, man. It really was.
It was.
But when I got back, the two women that joined us reached out and were like, "Dude, what the fuck is going on, man?" And it actually coincided with my dear friend and flatmate Meg saying the same thing. So it was kind of sort of an unintentional intervention, and I realized that there was a problem.
Ben, can I ask, was it only at that point you realized there was a problem, or was there any trigger before then where you thought I might have a problem?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like the one of the character traits of addicts in active addiction is an almost superhuman ability for denial and self-justification. So my ability to spin stories around what I was doing was unparalleled. You know, if I could harness that power, I would be a best-selling author. I haven't figured it out yet, but like, you know, the things that I would tell myself, and also then my ability to convince others of that new truth, as it were, was so powerful that I was able to exist as what a lot of people call a high functioning addict. Just to clarify, I wasn't fucking smashing the stock market. Do you know what I mean? The only thing high functioning about my addiction was that I was consuming an incredible amount of drugs and still holding down a job. You know, I was still being able to like maintain relative normality outside of that behavior. So yeah, like I became increasingly aware. It was 19 years. By the time I stopped, it was 19 years that I had been using for. I would say that the kind of latter 10 of those had got into the area of like abuse and, you know, and danger. And it was really that point then which the kind of denial and self-justification came up, say, because I recognized that like I was always the last person standing at the party. I was always, you know, taking drugs at events when nobody else was. I was always doing stuff like that. And then telling myself that either normalizing it or telling myself that it was just a moment in time. You know, I was just doing it because I was young and I would grow out of it. And the problem was that I was getting older and everyone else was stopping. Everybody was getting married and having children and taking on adult responsibility. And I just wasn't doing any of that stuff. Like I was.
So, I mean, from what you've said there, it sounds like you were just a legend.
And it's that kind of thinking that held me in that denial for ages.
I know.
Brilliant. But yeah, like it was.
I ain't got a problem. I'm a fucking legend.
Those. Funnily enough, those thoughts were never ones that occurred to me, despite my family's love of saying that they do. And I'm not saying it specifically Dara, my entire family love that. But you know, all of my problems stemmed from, as Chris mentioned before, trauma. And through kind of extensive work over the last 4 years, I discovered that most of my trauma came from being heavily bullied and really, really destroyed by a group of kids at school. And from that, I developed codependent behaviors. And when they stopped soothing that pain, I eventually moved on to the harder stuff. But it all came from a kind of deep, deep sense of self-loathing. Like I fucking hated myself. I was a gangly kid. You know, I had the same size head that I have now when I was like fucking 14, and like, you know, clothes just hung off me like they'd been shot at me from a clothing blunderbuss. Like I hated the way I looked. I hated the way I hated everything about my physicality. And a lot of it, again, was unacknowledged. You know, it was only became clear to me that was the case many, many years later when I actually started to look back at events and behaviors in the past. But yeah, like a deep hatred of myself, very, very low self-esteem. And, you know, like I say, the codependent behaviors, that's often how they map out. You know, I'm not an expert in the field of addiction, but certainly my experience and the experiences of those around me, like my sponsor and my sponsees, you know, we often look at it as, you know, there's a 3-stage thing, as I just mentioned: trauma, then codependency, and then the addiction. And so that's the way that you kind of work back through them. And, you know, having found some stability with regards to my drug addiction, like even though I'm in recovery, I will be an addict my whole life, and that will manifest itself in different ways. You know, right now it's food and shopping. You know, in the past it's been cigarettes and caffeine and sugar and porn. You know, and before that, of course, it was drugs.
What a breakfast!
Yeah, it's a wild ride in mine. Right? Meg hates it. Meg used to hate it.
I thought you said flapjacks.
Yeah, it's like, how am I meant to digest my eggs while watching this?
Yeah. Oh, that's not sanitary.
But yeah, like the that deep kind of sense of self-loathing definitely came in the form of, well, the way in which I soothed it was external validation. So I would constantly be looking for the approval of others, especially the approval of women, because my hatred of myself was predominantly to do with my physicality. When I was, externally validated by a woman, that was of a greater level of soothing than it was from kind of friends and family. But it didn't change the fact that behavior was rife throughout. So yeah, and eventually the whole thing brought me to my knees, and I ended up joining a 12-step program. And yeah.
How did these things affect work, and how is your recovery, your active recovery, now affecting work? And the same question for the relationships and everything else.
Well, it's interesting actually, because I think certainly during the step work, which is an aspect of a 12-step program, which is kind of like a journaling guide, and it invites you to look at your past and look at all of the shit that you've been through and kind of filter it down into core defects and rebalance those with principles and blah, blah, blah. The two things that came out of it it was clear that they were the two most confusing and thus most painful parts of my life were work and my romantic relationships. Work, again, as Dar, said previously, like it was all about, trying to be friends with everybody and mixing the criteria for a successful friendship into, a workplace was just devastating. It was a roller coaster. And quite often I would go in with zero control over whether I was going to have a good day or not. It was in the hands of others. And that really is the definition of kind of codependent behaviors is, outsourcing your well-being.
Living your life just as a reaction to other people's lives.
Yeah,
that's all it is. Yeah,
and that's that. That very much. In fact, that's a great description for very much how I was in every part of my life. But it was most profound, most noticeable in work. In relationships, it was. In my friendships with my family, it caused me to distance. I didn't speak to my family in some instances for years because the denial was still going, but there was still a part of me that was well aware that it was clear to other people what I was doing. And because my family know me so well, my unconscious technique of dealing with that was just to push them away, because if they weren't around, then they couldn't see the damage I was doing to myself.
Yeah.
Friends, for the most part, those relationships were great, but they were also characterized by a lot of dishonesty because I was lying to them about what was going on, and I was convincing them that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But it was really the romantic relationships that were the most painful because of that need for external validation.
In terms of the friend relationships, would you also say that some of the choices of friends were fueled by your habit as well? Like, they didn't come from the right place. These weren't people you would normally, I'll say, hang around 100%. Or trust. It was because of the habits and what you were getting up to really was the core of why you formed these friendships, he says in Bunny Ears.
No, I would disagree, Chris. This is your anxiety speaking. You're definitely one of us.
Temper it down, Craig.
I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, you're what we call a using friend. No, you're absolutely right, and that's one of the first things that you shed when you enter a state of recovery. You can't hang around with people that are with whom the relationship was based on those things, because obviously if you remove that, there is no relationship. Naturally, as a result of that, a lot of them fall by the wayside. Sorry to use the word again, naturally, but some of them are harder to kind of acknowledge that that's the case and say, listen, I was quite lucky in that in the run up to the point of being brought to my knees, even though the denial was very strong, I had begun a process of acknowledging that there was an issue. In fact, one of my dear friends, Alex, he was the guy who, when everything fell apart, actually walked me to the door of the 12-step program. But I actually confided in him the year before that I had a problem and I was trying to get clean on my own, and it just wasn't possible. Like I couldn't do it on my own because, I was the one causing it in the first place. But as a result of that kind of increasing awareness, there was a gradual separation from those individuals who I would use with. So yeah, I think that is definitely the case. But yeah, what I'm left with now, obviously, are the true friendships, which is great.
I know that we were never going to criticize each other, but I would pull you up on one thing, Ben. At the start of your section there, you used the word defect, one of my defects. It's not a defect, it's a symptom. One of your symptoms is that.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
You're as broken as everyone else is, which is to say you're not at all broken, you're just having a human experience.
Yeah,
you have what you're doing is you're operating within that with a medical condition, because that's what addiction is, that's what depression is, that's what anxiety is. You're having a human experience with symptoms. That's it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right to pull me up on it. And then actually what's happened there is I'm using terminology from a 12-step program, which makes sense in the context of step.
Oh, absolutely.
In a conversation about mental health in general, I think you're right to bring that up. That's, absolutely. So yeah, just to touch on then, like our experience of what that's been like in terms of things like stigma. Have you experienced kind of negative reactions as a result of the ailments that we
from other people? Do you mean?
Yeah, or from institutions? Yeah, other people in institutions, I guess, would be the primary two.
I if we go in the same order, I would have to say no. I've not really experienced stigma from it, purely because I didn't really talk about it. So it's a kind of, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The things that I've felt stigma about are as a result of my own actions. Do you know what I mean? So it's my own
being controlling.
Yes, my own fugue statey insane. I mean, like I would make something up to excuse a bit of behavior, and then I would judge the people who would react to that excuse based on if I actually had that condition that I was talking about.
Right. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That is absolutely fucking mental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can only do that looking back on it.
Yeah, indeed.
But in terms of stigma, not really. And I don't know if it's a kind of, there seems to have been a societal switch during Gen X, and I'm a Gen Xer, where it's not that people were open and honest about it, but I've found that if I'm open and honest about it, everyone I've talked to will open up a little bit about their own struggles.
Yeah. I agree.
So sure. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a stigma, but it's like, when you're introduced to a new group of people, what's the first thing you do? Like for me, it would be make jokes.
Sure.
That's what I would do to get people to relax and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you can't really do that if you walk in and say, "Oh, I'm a clinical depressive. How are you?" Well, no.
Well, I think you can.
You can. You absolutely can. But it's more of a challenge. It's more. I think the stigma is about opening yourself up in terms of vulnerability. In terms of institutions and stuff, no, I've never had a problem with that.
Right, okay.
Ben, you were going to say something about your birthday.
Yeah, no, just the whole kind of getting to know somebody by making jokes. 3 of my my dear friends, Amy, Meda, and Kendall, came to my 40th, and their resounding memory of the whole thing was standing with Darren for about 2 hours while he just told them dad jokes. They said it was the best 2 hours of the day for them. And I was like, oh, great.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
I tell you, if I were 30 years younger, unwed, and they had no taste in men, we would have had a different experience.
Yeah, it was Ben's birthday, but Darren was definitely star of the show.
Yes.
He was fucking hilarious.
I do recall that.
Paisley Scroton.
Paisley Scrotum, PI.
What a day. What a day. I'll concur with Darren. And I've had some great support over the past few weeks dealing with my condition and actually talking to people, whether it's close friends, work colleagues, or associates. I've never been met with any negativity. Some people may be more sympathetic or empathetic than others, but I've not had a problem opening up and been met with any, like I say, negativity or any condescendingness or anything like that. I've got some pretty blunt associates I work with that might say stuff. I think the most recent one, Ben, when I spoke to you a few days ago, when I spoke to that builder guy, he's a straight talking northern bloke, and said what he thought about the people that was selling me the house, which was very negative, which triggered me, as you know. But as soon as he realized what he said, he, quickly was trying to salvage the situation and, trying to make me feel better about it. So, again, friends, close friends, or just associates, I've not had a negative experience, if you like, just by letting people know what my state of mind is. People have been quite understanding to a degree.
It's a special level of thoughtlessness, isn't it? When somebody tells you that they're just about to complete on a house, so they start telling you all the problems with the people that you're buying the house from. It's like,
it was pretty curt and a kick in the nuts. I was like, I don't need to fucking hear this right now. I'm hanging by a thread, Nick. Mate. And he was like, oh yeah, no, it's not that bad, mate. You know what I mean? I was like, thanks, buddy.
Wicked. Great.
Yeah, exactly. You've pushed me out the plane, and then you threw the parachute out, and now I've got to try and fucking grab it. You know what I mean? Bless him. But he didn't mean anything by it. He's just a straight talking northern bloke, and that's fine. He's a lovely guy, you know.
But I think you highlight what can be an issue. What I have found myself is to be an issue is projecting some sense of my own confusion and anxiety and negativity, my own self-loathing onto other people's conversations. Do you know what I mean? Where I can, in a twisted way, make what they've said 10 times worse in my head.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's pure projection. It's not real. It's an illusion.
Exactly.
But it's because of the way my brain works. It's just it's how it processes it.
Well,
so I have to keep reminding myself that no, they're not attacking everyone with depression. You've just been an absolute dickhead there.
Which helps with your self-esteem.
Yeah, it's not unjustified.
It's funny, isn't it? Because in all three instances which we've discussed, those kind of three, I think quite kind of, I mean, they share commonalities, of course, but quite
hilarious. Is that the word you're looking for? With hilarious consequences.
There's kind of three states of mind. One of the things that they all share is a complete lack of perspective. When you're actually in the madness, you're gone. Like you just can't, and it's really difficult to talk somebody down from that state of mind when they're in it.
But I think it's also important to point out that every single person on the planet has that.
Yeah.
Everyone feels anxious. Everyone feels down at times. It's transitory, but it does happen. But the issue is some of us are stuck in that moment for our entire lives.
I remember when I was dealing with worry and stress and anxiety for the first time, as I mentioned, doing the kind of couple of courses of CBT, and my mum sent me a newspaper article, and it was in the Washington Post, and it was this guy kind of sort of digging into these, taking a swipe at these kind of people that are kind of pushing a constant Zen state of mind. And actually what he wrote was quite insightful, because what he was doing was defining the difference between stress and being overstressed. Because when people say, oh, I'm really stressed, they're not just saying they're stressed, they're saying they're overstressed. Like being stressed is a state of being overly so. Stress is a totally normal and totally necessary function. Like in order to get work done, in order to get things done, in order to kind of work optimally, we have to stress our systems. We have to bring ourselves up to that level.
Be under pressure.
So so to expand on what you were just saying there, Dara, like all of everything that we've talked about here, there's an aspect of that in everybody. Like even in my instance, I am an addict. I suffer with the disease of addiction. But if addiction wasn't a human characteristic, then the freemium app market wouldn't be a thing. Video games wouldn't be a thing. The online advertising wouldn't be a thing. It's a part of human nature, but sometimes it goes astray, doesn't it?
Yeah, mum. Yeah,
mum.
So quickly, have you, Ben? And just to forge you into this situation, have you ever encountered any negativity?
Yes, but I think that it comes down. I mean, you could say that all negative reactions to ailments or stigma in that respect comes down to a matter of ignorance. But I think the term addict is often, when you say the term addict to somebody, they think of a street addict. They think of a junkie. Sure. And there are, an old woman who's, lying to a GP in order to get multiple prescriptions for painkillers is as much an addict as the kid on the street who's robbing people for heroin. Like, they're both addicts. Yeah. And I think that street junkies, I hate that term because it sounds really, really harsh, but like street junkies, street addicts, that's what people think of when they hear the term addict. But, the recovery community has tens of thousands of people globally, and that's a small percentage of the number of addicts there are in the world. And a lot of them are functioning addicts or, recovering addicts. So, I think I can't think of any specific instances, but as a general rule of thumb, one of the 12 traditions in most 12-step programs is that we engage in a process of attraction rather than promotion. And so to that degree, it's quite different. Like, you don't want to be saying, like, you don't want to go out into the world and be like, I'm an addict, I'm in recovery, you need to come to this 12-step program specifically, because the person listening to you thinks you're a bit of a dick. In years to come, they might actually be in a place where they actually need a 12-step program, and they'll associate it with you. And they might then not go to it. So you have to be very careful when I find that I have to be very careful when I'm banding around terms like addict. I've obviously share that with, this would be the first time that I've ever spoke publicly, but most of the time, when I'm meeting new people, I'd be very careful to share that with them, because I don't know what their understanding of that term is. But I hope with, the increases in, mental awareness generally, that the possibility of stigma yielding a stigma, yielding a negative reaction, is diminishing.
Well, I think certainly since the 70s, since the late 70s, which is as far back as I can remember, I've seen society begin to move away from a punishment model to a prevention model. Do you know what I mean? In terms of understanding and enforcing all the laws around these kinds of issues. So,
there are European countries that have decriminalized hard drugs and treat it as an addiction. They actually provide safe places for people to use, and in those scenarios, give them the option, present options to them if they would like to address it.
Yeah. Is it Portugal?
I think so. Yeah.
That is an incredible step.
Because they're not being shunned into the alleyways, under bridges, reusing needles. They've got safe places. And sorry, Darren, carry on.
No, I was just to build on what you've said there, Chris, it's trying to remember that everyone is, certainly once you reach the age of majority, you're an adult deserving of both dignity and pride. And, the labels historically for things like addict or mental health or insane is a way to other people and get so that we don't have to think about them. Do you know? No, you're not within the bounds of what is accepted in society, so I don't have to worry about you.
So true. Just to clarify, our use of the words mad and insane at the start during the intro are because we consider ourselves that. It's
we can say that because we are.
Yeah, that's our word.
and if that's a problem for you, I suggest therapy.
Exactly.
No,
nice segue. Nice segue.
From what you've just said there was an interesting story. There's
You're ruining the segue.
Jessa Reed, I think is her name. She's an American comedian, and she tells a great story about how she got addicted to meth.
It's quite Moorish. It is quite Moorish.
It is quite Moorish. And she tells the story about how she heard, she tells her story in kind of segments. And it's so the first time I smoked meth. And I said, but I wasn't injecting, I was just smoking. And then she'll pause and go, so when I first injected meth, and then
nice.
She descends through this level of addiction until I think she read it in some magazine. If you eject meth and then your second piss after injecting meth has all of the meth in it purified by your body.
Oh my god.
And so she goes, but that's just really weird. That's just, it seemed to me disgusting. And then she paused and went, so the first time I drank my own piss. I'll link the video in the show notes. It's a really good video. But she said that she had a very an unusual bottoming out process. Is that she was in her sister's bathroom and she turned up wearing a ball gown and odd-fitting Dr. Martens after living on the street for years. Went into the bathroom, used, I think it was the toothbrush cup to catch her piss, and her sister walked in and said, "Wow, you really need help." And she said she just put the glass down and went, "Yeah, you're right," and then immediately went into recovery. Nice. She needed the level of intervention she needed was so small.
Yeah.
Oh, how she could have prevented that years ago. Don't do that, mate. Oh, yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah.
We're clearly different addicts because I'd have necked that cup before I went into the rooms, but that's just me. Anyway, so yes, you mentioned therapy, or we have mentioned therapy a few times. So moving from the madness into the solution, like how in terms of the things that we've been dealing with of present, how have you been managing these things? Like what's worked, what's not worked?
For myself, so it was the year 2000, and I was diagnosed and given medication. And that was like a bomb had gone off. A stabilizing bomb had gone off.
A bomb in a good way.
A bomb in a good way.
A controlled explosion.
A bomb.
A controlled explosion.
Controlled detonation.
And so that cleared up enough of the kind of the fugue so that I could process, rationally my existence, that it then sent me into an even further, deeper bout of depression because I realized what I'd done. Do you know what I mean? I felt the justified guilt of my actions. And so,
is that typical of someone going through depression to have that epiphany, should we call it?
There's a moment, I forgot what the actual moment is called, but you gain insight. That's the technical term, where you understand not perhaps fully why you did those actions, but you understand that an action has consequences.
Sure, yeah.
Both internally and externally. Yeah, it's that kind of idea where you suddenly realize the position you're in and thus the position you have put everyone else in. Through action or inaction.
Yeah, I really relate to that.
Yeah, so that then I didn't seek any kind of talking therapy because it just wasn't a thing. Or rather, it wasn't a thing outside of Alcoholics Anonymous at the time.
Right.
In Ireland. Jesus, you had to queue to get into Alcoholics Anonymous in Ireland. So, at the kind of start of the recovery journey, I had already been married. I was already married. And so it wasn't the best of situations, and we treated each other terribly, for which I feel immense remorse and guilt. But it ended, and I think it was right that it ended. And so we had moved to Edinburgh, and the woman in question moved on with her life, and I kind of milled around a little bit and, met and eventually had kids with, and then eventually married Vic. But it was during that phase, during that early phase with Vic, is where I realized that I needed to get myself squared away. There's no solutions. Nothing is solved. You just become aware of the capacity to impact other people that you and your condition have. So you manage it. So it's, to use your phrase, Ben, it's just I'm in constant recovery from clinical depression.
Yeah.
I have to be vigilant all the time, which is exhausting because you think, am I reacting to the kids not tidying their rooms proportionally? Or, and that's it. That apart from everything else, it's fine. That's the only trigger I have now is my kid's dirty room.
Well, you're only human, man.
Yeah,
human dad.
No, but you know what I mean? It's like I used to huff and puff and shout, and I don't do that anymore because it doesn't work, and it's not the person I want to be. So,
for sure.
Is there some way we can, come to a solution for that? So it was, for me, it was Vic's acceptance, Vic's total, almost glacier-like acceptance of me as a person. She saw something in me that I had thought was gone years ago, and she refused to let anything I said or did dissuade her from that. And so, if someone who is as good and as nice and as rational and is fucking irritating and petty and as her thinks that I'm okay, maybe I'm actually all right. And thus, and then when I was supposed to say we got pregnant, well, we did get pregnant. There's two of us, isn't it? Well, three if you count the kid. That was when I realized that, I really need to get matters in hand. So I went on the NHS. Again in Scotland, and you fill out this kind of test, a test to gauge your level of depression. And
on a scale of 1 to Adele, how sad are you?
It actually is a scale. An average person registers about 6. And a person, the point at which a person has to have medical intervention, as in you're admitted to a hospital or a medical facility of some kind, is 27, and the test goes up to 30. And I scored a 26, so I got an appointment within a couple of weeks.
You got a badge.
Yeah, I got a badge. There was lights, sirens, there was guys firing guns that do those backwards quotes. And then kind of 6 weeks intensive, and then ongoing every couple of weeks for the bones of a year with a chap called Mark Richelieu, who I credit with all my successes and my problems.
Double-edged sword.
He was great. He was an absolutely genius level kind of intellect sitting on the opposite side of the room from me. It was
amazing.
But I tell you, their first session it's the most uncomfortable I've ever been in a room. And I've been present at the birth of both of my children.
Right.
But it's just
after a heavy night out.
There is literally nowhere to hide, because the room is 2 chairs, a side table with a candle on it, and an iPod playing, orgasming seal music. The mammal, not the singer, the singer, the mammal.
Unblinking CCTV cameras looking at you.
Yeah.
Just a massive picture of Seal the singer on the wall behind the therapist.
We're a little bit crazy.
Nice.
I'm owning that one.
Nailed it.
But it's I don't know if this has been your experience of it, but I believe it's quite common, which is after each session, I was the most tired I can ever remember being. Like just exhausted,
shattered. Yeah.
From the kind of emotional unloading of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that your question? I can't remember what the question was.
Yeah. Just in terms of
the process,
the solution, what you've been doing. What about you, Krell? Like, what have you found?
What's been working for me, without a doubt, talking to people.
Yeah,
just talking. Like Ben, you've been there, thankfully, for which I'm sincerely grateful for, and other friends. Just talking has been, without a doubt, the most relieving process I could be doing. I've been doing a bit of journaling as well for the first time. I've read about it a lot, and I've been aiming to do it a lot. And I thought, well, now's as good a time as any, and that's been very, very helpful as well. I think, to summarize, just getting your thoughts out of your own head. You are your own worst enemy, and I work from home a lot. I'm self-employed, and that's a dangerous place to be. Even when I'm not suffering from anxiety, you can just feel lonely, and loneliness, as I'm sure we've experienced to various degrees, can be a not very nice thing. But when you've got a soup of irrational, illogical thoughts in your brain, and you're going round and round and round in a non-linear way and feeding yourself, it's very dangerous. So if you haven't got someone to speak to, again, journaling, just writing those thoughts down in no particular order. When you first pick up the pen for the first time, you're a bit stuck, but it doesn't take long. As soon as your pen touches the paper and you start writing, it gushes out of you without trying to sound gross. It really does.
Sure.
So that's what I've been going through, and I am also about to start another course of CBT, and actually with the intention of going long term this time. Like I say, I did a short course of it a few years ago when I had an episode. I had about 4 or 5 sessions, and I felt great, and so I parked it. And I think, maybe to highlight what Darren said in terms of ebbing and flowing, in terms of the medication and consistency, I've learned from my past experience, and from what Darren's saying, is like, you got to keep going. Like this morning, I felt really, really positive, to the point where I was like, do I need CBT moving forward? Actually, I feel great. But of course, halfway through the morning, my normal anxiety started kicking in, all very manageable. But I was like, no, you've got to go. No matter how good you feel, just go, because you've been here before, So I'll let you know how that goes, but I'm looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, it'll be amazing, man. I mean, when I did my first course of CBT, I remember everybody saying to me before I went in, it's like, oh, it's amazing stuff. It'll rewire your head. That was the thing they kept saying to me. And I was so cynical. I was like, no, it's not. Like, I'm going to be talking to somebody in a room for an hour on 6 occasions. I've done that on hundreds of occasions in the past, and it's never made any fucking difference. And and I did it, and a lot of it was, a lot of the CBT, which is, for those that don't know, is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's to do, a lot of my experience of it was to do with defining what the difference between worry, stress, and anxiety were, and then looking at the kind of psychological and physical impact, or the actual mechanisms that are at play, and then taking action to basically stop them going into the negative spiral that you mentioned, Dar. And I did 6 weeks of this course, and then I didn't really think anything. They were like, yep, okay, on you go. And I was like, well, I don't really feel any different. And then it was about 3 or 4 months later, I was having a conversation with Dad about something at work, and he was the one who said, wow, that CBT's really, really done a number on you. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, you're talking totally different now about this particular issue at work to how you would have done in the past. And I was like, and so often is the case, I think, with these things, that you actually notice the difference in yourself through somebody else. It's somebody else saying, like, you seem to be doing a lot better. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, fuck, yeah, no, I actually am. I remember it being a lot worse. And when you can see that A-B kind of comparison, like, it's empowering, man.
That must be very good, in the sense that, like, you didn't even realize you were better. That's how effective it was. You didn't consciously have to think, I need to be more CBT at this. You just were,
Yeah.
Who's your therapist, or who was your therapist? Give me that number.
I'll find it for you. I'll find it. But again, it was like Dar explained, it was an NHS thing. And, I appreciate that those services are not available in every country, but, GPs are in most, and they can certainly start you down that path. But, yeah, I mean, for me, thanks for asking. I knew you were going to.
And that's all we got time for. I'm joking.
Obviously, the 12-step program that I'm in has been the core solution for me. There are many aspects to it. Meetings, well, there's what they call the 4 S's: sharing, service, step work, and sponsorship.
Shagging.
And shagging, that's the 5th S, yeah. Actually, they do say that there's a 5th S, which is shut the fuck up, because most people come into the rooms thinking they know everything. And the reality is your best thinking brought you to the fucking rooms, so you definitely don't. So just shut up and do what you're told. And I did that. I actually came into the rooms and I was clean for 70 days, and then I relapsed at a New Year's party. And when I came back after the party, it took me a couple of days to acknowledge what had happened. And then I was like, right, yeah, I need to start fucking accepting that I do not know what to do. And the other people, I could see these other people that were just in, they'd clearly been where I was, but they were just having the time of their lives, man. And they had peace. And that was what I desperately wanted. And so I just started doing everything they told me. And, the fundamental, the first few things are to find a sponsor and start doing the step work. And the step work is, in relation to what you were saying about the journaling, that's all it is. It's a journaling guide. It is a spiritual journey of sorts, but I would argue that any recovery process from any mental health illness is a spiritual. It's a nurturing. It's an
internal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a nurturing of your spirit, whatever that may mean to you. So that's been a huge part of it. And like Kral said, just being able to coalesce the jumble of raw data that's bouncing around my head at any time of the day into a form. And that form might be talking to somebody, or it might be writing it down. Both of those, I think, are equally powerful. For people in recovery, they call it fellowship. Basically, after the meeting, you go and you spend time just talking with other people about your feelings for hours, and it's wonderful. But the actual process of writing it down as well, it's like when I have a thought, this actually came about because I was sat on the sofa with my flatmate many years ago, and bless her, we just watched the film, and she turned to me and she said, "Ben, when you have a thought, do you hear it in your own accent in your head?" And I thought, I'm not sure that I even have sentences in my head. I don't think that's how it works.
You just have ideas.
Yeah, it's just a jumble of data, and there's a part of my brain that goes like, right, if you wanted to articulate this, we would need this, and this, and this is the order we'd put them in. The problem is that, like, if that thought is troubling, or if that thought is a problem, I need it to be ordered in order to figure out what the solution is. And I can't do that while it's bouncing around my head, because my head's the same thing I need to figure out the solution. So by writing it down or talking about it, I'm able to it's like downloading data. It's like removing a bunch of bandwidth from your computer to free up, processing power. And then I can see what the problem is, and then I can start to find a solution for it. So that's been huge. But I think in addition to that, I have a kind of daily routine which I have to maintain, otherwise I go mental. And that involves meditation, it involves journaling, it involves connecting with other people like me, it involves connecting with my friends and family. That's not all in the morning, by the way, that's just a general routine.
It's the first half hour.
Yeah. And things like that basically center me and kind of bring me to the present moment and right size my thinking, because on my own I'm a nightmare. Like, I'm a fucking nightmare. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I just missed something that has been incredibly useful to help me manage my anxiety recently has been picking up my guitar and being creative for the first time in over 10 years.
Huge. Yeah.
I hadn't realized, historically, as a young kid, I've been a musician. I played guitar religiously. That was who I was from the age of 8 into my 20s. And then in my 20s, it just kind of fizzled out because of adulting and work and things like that. And I just kind of lost interest. And a good friend of mine suggested, pick up your guitar again. And I've always been hesitant over the past 10 years. When you've been out of touch of something that you used to love, you almost resent it because you're like, oh, you're just going to be shit. Don't do it. And the odd time I did pick up a guitar was so rusty. I was like, oh, I don't want to touch it. Do you know what I mean? But I thought, screw it. I've got nothing to lose. And having reconnecting with that creative outlet has been massive. Absolutely massive, and it's actually filled a hole in me I didn't realize I had as well, regardless of my anxiety. But and that it went hand in hand with, again, helping the anxiety. So get creative, and even if you don't think you are, some sort of creative outlet. And when I say creative, I just mean let your mind go loose. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't let it be linear and militant, and just let your emotions take over in the form of painting or writing or playing an instrument or whatever it might be, or singing at the top of your lungs in your kitchen, whatever.
I really relate to that, man. Like, I found my journey back into creativity over the last year has been very empowering, and for me that's producing electronic music, it's DJing, it's been a bit of mini painting, creativity. Obviously those are kind of more in the arts sphere of creativity, but obviously creativity exists in administrative work. You guys know I love a fucking spreadsheet, and organizing the podcast has been...
There's no bigger trigger for my fucking depression than your spreadsheets, mate.
Well, there's always a price. There's always a bill to pay. As long as I'm not paying it, I'm fine with that. But organizing the podcast is... And the creative work that we do on the adverts, for instance, that is just one of the greatest joys of my life, like hands down. And
because you've got no boundaries. You've got no boundaries.
Exactly. Yeah. And the brain just goes into this particular wave that is... there's nothing quite like it. Like, do you experience that, Dar? Because you make a lot of mods for Warhammer games, don't you? Like fan mods. Because the end result of those, they look like something that Games Workshop would produce. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah.
They're incredibly stylized and very, very clearly a lot of time and effort has gone into them. Do you find that you get into that state of kind of cognitive flow while you're making?
Yeah, I mean, I even find the challenges of things like creating stuff or converting the kind of raw document into a PDF and then having to go through and correct all the errors and all the problems and finding the correct images and and all those challenges. They're like mini quests. Yeah. So once you have tangibly solved a problem, you get a little rush, and then you solve another one and another one and another one. And it's nothing succeeds like success. Yeah, you get a real good thing. And because obviously my kids have not so much now, but have previously been a kind of, I was about to say, a real sink for my time. What a great dad I am.
I think it's called time well.
Time spent well, yes. But they've required a lot of looking after. I had very limited amount of hobby time, and trying to motivate yourself to get the airbrush out and clean it, and then build a model, and then sort out color scheme, and then get painting, and then and anyone who paints miniatures knows that miniatures look god awful no matter how good you are at painting until the last 10%. It all comes together in the last 10%. So it's not as immediate in terms of the feedback of creating the PDFs.
Yeah, I find with the creative process, in fact, half the battle is just sitting down in front of the thing. Like,
getting started.
And like 100%, actually even get, there are times where I'm just like, do you know what? I've got, I plan to do like a couple hours on a track I'm working on or something. And then, through procrastination and whatever else, I get distracted, and suddenly there's only 15 minutes left of the evening before I need to, wind down or whatever. And so I'm like, right, I'll just turn the computer on. I'll open up the project and then I'll just sit there. And invariably, I then do something, even if it's just for 15 minutes. And that 15 minutes, just the impact that it has on my mind, especially in terms of kind of dispensing with the stress of the day and kind of drawing a line in the sand so that my brain can start to relax so that I can get into a better state to go to sleep. It's so impactful. And it all comes from just sitting in front of the thing, like just turning up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, I mean, continuing on that theme then, we are a Warhammer podcast. So let's talk about yes, we are apparently. So let's talk about some Warhammer. Like how do you find, I guess it's probably going to be more of a question for Dar, given his level of involvement. But I guess the same thing could be said for things like D&D, which I know you're into, Kral. So
any hobby, any of the hobby stuff. Yeah.
So how do you find that Warhammer, and its various forms, its various activities, kind of help your state of mind? Does it help your state of mind?
It does. I feel like, without diminishing anyone's previous statements, I am addicted to the Warhammer IPs. My mind invariably ends up swimming in that kind of in those settings. So, it was when I was 15, I was exposed to, in a good way, the Warhammer fantasy role-playing game. By the end of the year, for Christmas, I'd gotten the Fantasy Battle book and the 40k book. I think I'd sat down and worked out that I had bought every single game and supplement that Games Workshop produced from 1988 through to about 2009, 10.
Yikes.
Every single book that wasn't a novel, but I had also bought most of the novels. Wow. So it was pure escapism for me, because my own reality sucked so much ass because of the condition I had. I went swimming in
another world.
In the worlds of Warhammer, and then in the worlds of War Machine, the worlds of other games, D&D and the various flavors and expansions that are available for that. So
that was your sanctuary.
Yeah, that's where most of my time was spent. So the result of it is I'm incredibly comfortable in my own company, which is not great, because I'm also a very sociable person. So anytime that there's been a chance to go out and do stuff, I'm on, I'd rather stay home and read or play or what have you. But in terms of a release and that creative release and that sense of worth and a mild sense of community, for me at least, anyway, it's been brilliant. I don't know how my life would look differently without it. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's not that I wouldn't still be here or any grandiose statement like that, but
you can't imagine your life without Warhammer.
Without that sense of kind of fun and now more now than at the start, inclusion.
And do you think in terms of that conclusion, do you think it's the community aspect of it is a part of that relief or that escapism, like knowing that when a new rulebook is released, there are literally hundreds of thousands, possibly millions, I assume, of people across the world
or billions
reading that lore, or billions, trillions even, reading. Who knows? Nobody does. We'll never find out. Reading that same information, being lost in that same world, and then being able to bump into those people in places and conventions and being able to kind of talk to them about it.
I think for people who got into the hobby later than I did, yes, that's a huge part of it. I mean, it's an important part of it, regardless of when you come into the hobby. And you can easily get a sense of connection with someone who plays these games. It's a relatable, it all comes down to relatability.
Yeah.
But like when I got into the hobby, the internet didn't exist.
Right.
So there was no other than going to gaming clubs, which I didn't enjoy because I was antisocial is the wrong word, but I was so uncomfortable in myself that I didn't feel any sense of worth going somewhere. I just wanted to be left alone, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So, yes. So I think that it has become a greater part. It has become a more rewarding part for me in terms of the community in general. As I have exposed myself to the community, yes.
My as a day job,
let me just pause you there and say, well done, lads, for not making a joke about the exposed thing.
I nearly did.
Carry on.
As my day job, I'm a maintenance engineer, so I go into about 10, 12 houses a day across London, and there have been a handful of instances where I've walked in and there's been a table set up with a painting station, or there's a bookshelf with a bunch of Warhammer books on it, and invariably those people, it's like we've known each other for years. It's like instantaneous. And I assume that it's the kind of fantasy version of football. I don't like football, but I know that, like a lot of people that do like football, as soon as they meet each other, they just talk about football, and it's like they've known each other for years. So it's my kind of first experience of that. Like, I went into this property the other day, and the guy, there was no miniatures or anything, but he just had a couple of like paint racks on his table, and I was like, oh, do you paint miniatures? And he was like, and the look on his face, he was about your age, Dar, and the look on his face was just one of pure glee, and I could see his inner child just bounce out of him, and it was like, yay! And I was there for about an hour and a half just talking about everything. It was fucking great, man. So yeah, I can relate to that. Crowd, because you play D&D, and so have you found that that's been a positive impactor?
No, but I only say that, and I love D&D in the context of my anxiety, because I've been playing it for several years now and haven't had any particular episodes, anxious moments, you know what I mean, to help with that. Although saying that, as I said before, saying that, like, my anxiety has been a source of much amusement for a lot of people, and one of the classic things I would do is when we would do a D&D meetup, the day before, or even the morning of, I would just be like, oh guys, I don't know if I can come for whatever reason. I'd just make up a reason. I don't know if I can. And invariably, I would end up there, and it would be a cracking evening. You know what I mean? And they always are. But without fail, I would almost always, and I probably still will. We've got a D&D session coming up, and I'm thinking I might not be able to go simply because it's close to the moving date, but I will come up with excuses. Do you know what I mean? But I know I will end up there anyway, and it'll be amazing. Yeah. But in the sense of Warhammer, yeah, definitely. And I think 2 days ago when we did a Chunks of Dar recording, tier 2 patrons only, shameless plug anytime. Yeah, again, considering my current state of mind, being very anxious right now, maybe you saw how joyous I was that evening, and we had a great recording. That was the least anxious and the kind of happiest I've been in many weeks that evening. And I put that down to the podcast recording, the Warhammer recording. So yeah, that has the show and Warhammer has been really quite helpful for me, as a distraction, shall we say, which maybe isn't the right term, because a distraction is just putting stuff off, isn't it? But it does, much like playing the guitar. Yeah, it distracts me in a positive way. It puts me, because it allows us to be creative, producing the show and whatnot is an absolute joy. And also just witnessing and observing our amazing community as well. I can, although I'm not as embedded and ingrained into the community as maybe the painters are and things like that, and attending the various meets and things like that, it is very, very satisfying and nice to see this amazing group of people, come together. And again, like you, Ben, you walk into a thing, you don't know this guy, you spot a couple of paint pots, it's like you've known them all your life. And same with these guys. It's like, never met these guys, and hopefully I will, at least some of them, but maybe I won't, but it doesn't matter. We know each other,
Yeah.
So I'm laughing because we've never met these guys, and we never will.
Tier 100 patrons only.
Yeah, but then I mean, you're, I think the kind of positive one of the aspects of the show, of producing the show, is the storytelling. Like, not to, stroke your ego too much, Dar, but you're a fucking fantastic storyteller, and you spin, you create these worlds in my mind as we're doing it that really take me away. Like, when the recording ends, I'm an addict. I get high off that shit, and as soon as the recording ends, I'm like, boo, like back down to ground level again, But it is escapism, and like for me, like, I mean, when I was younger, you taught me to paint miniatures, and we did quite a bit of that together, and then I got distracted by partying, which unfortunately took me down a particular route, and so got out of it. But coming back to it has been a great joy, because even though I wasn't into Warhammer for a large part of my younger life, one of the uniform constants through my whole life has been video games. I know Kral and I did a short podcast called One Pixel Short before we started this one. It kind of overlapped with the start of the Old World show, where we looked at the sociology and psychology of video games, but told from the perspective of 4 people that knew nothing about those topics. So it was a great laugh. We only lasted for about 9 months, but one of the things that came up again and again was the kind of positive parts of playing video games against the negative parts. The negative parts are well documented because the media would have you believe that they're incredibly destructive. And like anything, when taken to the nth degree, of course, it's massively destructive.
Yeah, too much of any one thing is destructive.
Yeah, of course. But at the same time, like, I game now. I might game for a couple hours on like a Friday or Saturday night if I don't have anything on. I may jump on and play some online stuff with the lads like for an hour or so midweek at most. That's the latter of those tends to be the rare occasion. But the games that I go for are always single player story led, because they are the ones that give me that greatest level of escapism. And escapism, I think, as a term, has got a bit of a bad rep, because it sounds like you're trying to like shirk your duties, but the problem is that the way that my brain works, if I don't force myself to sit down and play something like that and get out of gear, I will keep doing shit right up to bedtime, and then I'm fucked, because I'm going to bed wound up, hyped up. I won't sleep well, and then I wake up the next day and I'm tired. And like I said before, that is enemy number one. Like, all of the worst parts of me come out to play when I'm in a state of exhaustion. So like being able to like jump onto a video game and just lose myself in another world for an hour, even less sometimes it's just half an hour, has such an enormous impact on my overall well-being. And I really feel the difference. I mean, it sounds a bit dependent, but I really feel the difference if like I go a couple of weeks without playing. If I feel a strong draw back to that other world just to escape, and it gives me perspective on the world that I do exist in. So yeah, it's a massively positive force in my life if it's treated properly. It's treated properly.
Yeah.
It can easily be not. There were just a couple of things that I thought would be worth mentioning while we're talking about kind of Warhammer and the overall impact on mental health. We went to Warhammer Fest last year
in 23,
23, which was great fun, man. We met a lot of cool people, saw a lot of cool shit. One of the individuals that we met was a gentleman named Jason Hurd, who is involved in one of the Games Workshop departments called Warhammer Alliance. And I thought this would be worth mentioning, because I don't know, we got chatting with Jason, and he invited us to a closed lecture about Warhammer Alliance. And it was really...
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we were doing there, but it was really kind of geared towards showing, the small audience of SEN professionals, special education needs specialists, and schools and kind of youth clubs and outreach programs, basically showing them what Warhammer Alliance is about. And from their site, it says, the Warhammer Alliance is the educational support program for the Warhammer hobby. With a wealth of free support from Games Workshop, it offers young people a chance to engage in a fun, creative, and sociable hobby. And the reason I thought it would be worth mentioning is because there was this, I don't know if you remember, there was a few wonderful success stories told by the individuals on stage. And one of them was about this kid. So basically, Games Workshop will send free paints, free miniatures, free terrain, rule books, like everything that you would need to kind of get rolling with the hobby. So you can start after school clubs or whatever it is, and get people engaging in the hobby, but also with each other. And they had this instance of a kid that had, I think it was autism, and they kind of set out the board and whatnot and had all the miniatures on it on day one. And this kid just sat in the back wall with his jacket on and his hood up, didn't speak to anybody, just wouldn't engage. The second day they then did this, suddenly, the kid had taken his jacket off and was like sat next to the board. And he didn't say anything for that session, but, he watched all of the other kids kind of playing and being taught the rules. And by the third session, this kid was, leading the charge, and this is a kid that was really struggling to engage, with anyone. And through this, shared fantasy world, this kid was able to engage and deal on, I hate to use the word normal, but a normal level, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. Absolutely. As you say, just that one thing in common, like disarms. That's the wrong word in that context.
Yeah,
but
I think that makes sense, though.
Gives people something to focus on, distract them from their own distractions, their own, I won't say defects, their own symptoms and things like that.
Get them out of self.
Exactly. No, I remember that story. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
So if anyone is listening and is interested, you can head to warhammer-alliance.com, and there's all the gory details on there, and you can reach out to them. And then the other thing that came out of that festival, that conference, Expo, that's the one, was the wonderful people at the Miniature Apothecary.
Our dear friends, those two reprobates.
Hi guys,
our dear friends Lauren and Matt, who, I mean, we met them. We were best mates within about 10 minutes, weren't we? We were.
Let's set the stage appropriately. You were recognized and you got an ego boner the size of the facility. And so, come on, we've got to meet these guys. They're great.
At which point, Dar ran off to the shop and Kral and I went over and we were playing. What card game did we play with them? It was
Elector Counts?
No, the
Munchkin or something.
Oh yeah, 40k Munchkin.
Mischief? Is it Munchkin? Is that what it's called?
Munchkin, that's the one. Yeah,
Mischief.
Yeah, it was with our Canadian buddy
Charles
as well.
Dickens.
Oh yeah, with Scott as well. Scott was with us, absolutely.
Uber Scott, yeah,
Uber Scott. And but anyway, we got chatting with these guys. Now, it transpired after talking with Lauren and Matt for a while that they both worked in mental health. I think Lauren was an occupational therapist and Matt was a healthcare support worker. But they created a community on Discord and other platforms, I think, called the Miniature Apothecary, which is
Twitch as well.
And Twitch as well, exactly. And it's basically a community that focuses on, the hobby as a tool for, improving mental health. And it's wonderful. They're wonderful.
Absolutely.
They've been great. They've been great followers of the show. They've been great support, and they're a lot of fun. And the platform is that server is actually open to anybody. So if you are interested, you just go on to Discord and search for the Miniature Apothecary, and it's a free to join. So we'll put in a link in the show notes for that as well. But they do like hobby hangouts on Twitch and community events and stuff, which is excellent. And much love to them. Keep up the good work, guys. The final thing then to touch on is the theme for Mental Health Awareness Week, which is movement. So I'm getting this from mentalhealth.org.uk, which says that the aim is to help people to find moments of movement in their daily routines. Going for a walk in your neighborhood, putting on your favorite music and dancing around the living room, chair exercises while you're watching television. So I thought it might be good. I think we may have mentioned it a few times earlier, but how does movement and exercise help you guys in terms of, state of mind, overall well-being, dealing with the symptoms of the ailments we have discussed when they flare up?
I'm not sure in terms of mental health, but certainly in terms of physical health, because I'm now going to be 52 this year. God. Like, if I don't move, my joints seize up. Quite simply, my lower back down to my ankles, so I have to walk all the time.
You make it sound like a necessary evil. I don't want to, but I must.
Well, thanks for being so understanding, Chris. I have depression. So movement and exercise is vital in me being able to fight off my kids, because they are savages.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I always Vic, like on our honeymoon, we went on honeymoon to Stockholm, and we walked 20 kilometers a day.
Nice,
because that's how Vic wanted to fuck me. And I was just shattered at the end of every day. But I felt great, mostly because I really enjoy Swedish food. But it was good.
Loganberry and meatballs.
Loganberry and meatballs, yeah.
But that's that's got to have an impact on your overall, feeling better physically has got to have an impact.
I've never felt so much relief as when I'm able to sit down. So the walking really is a ramp up to that sense of relief.
Sure.
It's earning the sit down, though.
Yes, it's earning the sit down.
If I wake up and spend the entire day sitting down, I don't enjoy it half as much as I do as if I go for a walk and then go and sit down.
I've really earned this sit.
But I'm being glib, but I do feel better after a big walk. Exercise, I've yet to break through the "this is good for me" line. So at the moment, it's necessary evil. And a special shout out to the 101st Airborne for ruining me in terms of exercise regimen. But
amazing.
The good stuff's on the other side. So, got to keep it going.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
And what about you, Crown?
I can definitely...
Are you Joe Wixing it? Is it Joe Wicks?
No, Les Mills.
Oh, Les Mills, one of them.
One of them. They're all the same. That
was a terrible movie, Les Wicks.
I can attest to the benefits, both mentally and physically, of keeping active. And it is one of the things, working out is one of the things that I've been doing it for years, so I am in the habit of doing it without trying to sound virtuous and smug about it. But it's something that I enjoy doing now. And it is one of those things, Darren, like once you get into it, once you get over that initial hurdle, it can be addictive. I mean, it's still easier not to do it every day. You can always say no. But like any habit, any addiction, I guess, it's you do look forward. Well, no, that's the wrong term. But yeah, I always benefit, and I always look forward to that post-workout glow, as some people might call it. Like working hard, getting a sweat up, and getting those endorphins going, and that's what it is, isn't it? When you work out, hey Molly, when you work out, you get a big release of endorphins, which is the feel-good hormone in you.
Yeah.
So I can definitely condone an active lifestyle. It does you the world of good. And even it doesn't necessarily mean high cardio. Like I say, as mental health suggests, just going for a brisk walk or a walk, getting the heart rate going slightly and being out in nature, the combination of those two things is massively positive.
Yeah.
What about you, Benny?
Yeah, I relate to that. Like I've I in typical addict fashion became addicted to the gym about God, that must have been about 6 or 7 years ago. I went through a couple of years of like doing 6 days a week, and it's not great. It's not, doing it to that level. For me, at least, it wasn't great because it meant having to sacrifice a lot of other things. If you're at the gym every day, that's a large chunk of the available time you have for other stuff. And so other stuff had to, there's always a bill to pay, as a friend of mine says. So there had to be a sacrifice. But, eventually kind of finding a more balanced, even keel with that. I mean, I go 3 times a week, but again, that's just what works for me. But the same as you, like I used to do morning workouts, and I really, it became a kind of mixed bag, because on one side, I really enjoyed the clarity that that rush of endorphins as a result of the physical activity gave you, and having that kind of going into a working day. It wasn't just clarity; it was like an increased, like an overall sense of well-being, and kind of positivity, and that made dealing with the difficult things that the day will invariably throw at me a lot easier. But at the same time, I was also then fighting back a wave of tiredness because I had exerted myself so early. I ended up looking into it, and I discovered that in terms of your circadian rhythm, the best time to exercise is towards the end of the afternoon. In terms of, I think it's to do with heart rate, blood flow, oxygen availability, that sort of thing.
Libido.
I'm not an expert. Yeah, exactly. I'm not an expert in the matter, but by all means, do your own research. But I actually found moving my working or my exercise to that time of day, I got way more out of it, and it's early enough in the day that you're not. They say if you do exercise towards the end of an evening, it will basically amp you up, and you'll struggle to sleep, or it'll affect your the quality of sleep. But as I say, doing it earlier in the day then, was kind of affecting my overall energy levels. So, but everybody's different, man. So a lot of people dig those early workouts. But again, like you say, it's it's not just about hardcore. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger to make sure that your physical activity is impacting your mental health. Like just getting out for a walk. If I'm struggling with a piece of work, working from home, just leaving the space that I'm in and going and walking, that combination of physical activity, fresh air, change of scenery, especially if you're in nature, because I read something recently about human beings can see more shades of green than any other animal, and the impact that that's meant to have on your psychological well-being is meant to be quite profound. So I think I love the idea of chair exercises while you're watching television. That just sounds...
Well, I mean, I'm going downstairs tomorrow to curl some sofas.
You're doing it wrong, Darren. Yeah, you're doing it wrong.
I tell you, there's another important aspect of movement, which is bowel movement. So massively.
Remember to shit, people.
Stop eating sugar, or stop eating as much sugar as you can. I have found that to have an amazing impact on my mental health.
Okay, that is something that actually I've read recently, and something I'm trying to do to try and curb my anxiety. Is one of the things you said, Ben.
Super difficult.
Watch the sugar, watch the caffeine intake.
Yeah, man.
Cut it down, if not out, basically.
Yeah, that's massive. I mean, cutting it out is extreme. I have my dear friend, my brother Andy, who is in the program with me. We speak pretty much every day. He's on a mission at the moment trying to cut out sugar and caffeine fully, and it's it's an ordeal, man. Like because it's so ingrained in what we do,
and it's in everything.
It's in everything, exactly.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid, isn't it? Yeah.
Like Dar said, like looking to kind of cut down on the more obvious sources of sugar is not to mention just the impact that has on your ability to sleep, which in my experience has been. I think I might go as far as to say I think that's the primary impactor on my mental health. Is like how much sleep I've had and the quality of it. And if I'm mainlining sugar all day, it doesn't look good for the following day.
Yeah.
That and looking at my computer screen, like working till like gone 10, that will keep me up without a doubt till like 2. if not longer.
Yeah.
So screen time, cut it out.
We'll look at that because we obviously kind of moved on to the whole thing of like self-care. I thought it might be nice just to round out with. I've titled it Call to Action, but that makes it sound like we know what we're fucking talking about. So I'm not going to call it Call to Action, but like, I guess,
actions.
Let me put it this way, right? If somebody came to you and they were struggling with mental health, what would you suggest first? What would be the first, second, and third things that you might say?
Go for a coffee or go for a walk.
Yeah.
And just have a chat and ask them to try and see if they can explain what they're feeling and then shut the fuck up. And don't suggest anything. Don't say they're doing anything wrong or right. Just let them talk. Because
you mean you shut the fuck up, not them?
The listener.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be great.
I was like, okay, yeah. No, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Try and make an arrangement to meet up for coffee or go for a walk again in a week's time. Like
that's nice.
I had set up in North Berwick, where I live, a depression support group. We were just like peer support. We just chatted. And there was a couple of instances, but one leaps straight to mind where I got a vibe that this person was actually in crisis. Right. Because the way they were talking, the way they were holding themselves, the way they were breathing. So, after the meeting, I just said, Joe, why don't we just have a stroll up to the doctors? We just have a chat, and if something happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But let's go and why don't we just go and have a chat with a GP? And the GPs could not have been more accommodating.
That's amazing.
But that's an extreme case. Most of this time, it'll be you'll notice someone's behavior changes ever so slightly, or they lose interest in a thing they've previously been very passionate about. And it's that point, if you notice it, or if they come up and talk to you, just go for a chat. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. There's no... Yeah. This is the thing, is that there should be no barriers to entry for conversations like that. And if you're going to make the time to meet someone regularly, make the fucking time.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
But I suppose the other important thing is you're not responsible for their mental health.
Yeah.
You can be on their side. It's their fight.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly like I said about my friend Alex. I'm very careful to say that he didn't come into my first meeting with me. He walked me up to the door and he said, I can show you the door, but I can't walk through it for you. You know, you can force a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. So 100%. Crowell?
Really what Darren said, just talk to someone. If someone is struggling, the act of talking to someone is so liberating. I can't even explain it. For two reasons. One, because you will more than likely be welcomed with open arms to talk to someone that you know. They will want to hear you out. Yeah. But also that act of unjumbling all that mess that's inside your head that's very non-linear, and you can't get out of this feedback loop. So it's those two things, and probably much more as well. So, and it begins with that as well, doesn't it? There's also kind of an act of acknowledgement that I need to address this. I need help, and there is something liberating in that in itself. That you are now on the road, on a positive road to recovery, to positivity. Absolutely. Yeah. So if I had to pick one thing, just talk to someone that you know, and you'll be liberated.
Yeah. Just before you chip in there, Ben, I was just going to say that if you're in a position where someone comes up and asks to talk about this stuff, or saying they've got a problem or that kind of stuff, you have to remember the sheer amount of courage that it takes to do that. Yeah. But also the amount of self-analysis that person will have had to have gone through already. It's an enormous amount of effort for someone who's trapped in a situation to come up and say, listen, I'm feeling X, Y, Z. Can we just have a chat? I think I might need some help. Could you help me unclutter a bit.
Yeah.
You know, especially for men, that is a year's worth of work that they've gone through before they get to the point where they're going to ask for any help.
Yeah.
And they may never ask. That's the point. You have to be, you know, not hyper vigilant, but if you notice something, say something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, I wouldn't, you know, I think, I mean, yeah, as you both said, the communication thing is key. You know, in the program I'm in, the fundamental part, or one of the main parts for me, is that connection with other people to just, you know, unclutter my brain, to just be able to download what's in it and, you know, hear it outside of my own head and, you know, show it in the harsh light of day to see what is actually a relevant issue that I need to deal with and what's just absolute shit, you know. And I can't do that on my own. I literally can't do that on my own. I've tried. I tried for 10 years and it just doesn't work. You know, I need to be able to share what's going on with another human being. So, yeah, and like Dara said, you know, in the moment in which somebody is starting to share stuff about their mental health and it's, you know, perhaps the first time they've ever done so, they don't need to be told what to do. They need a space to be able to hear themselves, to familiarize themselves with the problems that they're having and hear themselves talking about them. If you do need to share back, and this is, I think, an absolutely fundamental part of this process, and certainly something that, Dar, you were kind of key in terms of implementing with our mental health room on the Discord, is if you have to share back, you share back about yourself.
Yeah.
You share your experience. Like, what have you gone through? You know, how can you relate to what the person's saying? How can you relate? What happened for you? And what did you do to help, you know, deal with that? And if that person feels that sounds familiar, then it's up to them then whether they choose to follow on that. But don't tell them what to do, because it's just going to repel them.
Well, it's not about just repelling, but the sheer ego in thinking that you have had the full gamut of human experience and understood it, not only had it, but understood it and internalized it well enough that you can rationally advise someone else about this with no training whatsoever. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
There's my advice. Yeah.
Well said. That's what you should do.
Nothing makes me madder. Nothing makes me madder.
But then, like, you know, if we were to kind of take this over then to the individual in question, you know, I think that all of the things that we've talked about so far are worthwhile considerations. You know, self-care, you know, limiting sugar and caffeine and nicotine and alcohol and drug consumption. You know, all of those things have a massive impact on my mental health. And, you know, when I reduce them, I invariably find a greater level of peace in my life.
But you're not as much crack.
Yeah, exactly.
Not as much of a legend.
That was actually something that Amy said to me at the start of this, or when I was kind of about a year in. She was just like, "Are you worried now that you'll go to parties and just not be as fun?" I was like, "Well, I wasn't." I am now. Thanks, pal.
Was that my Amy?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, bless her.
She's her own person, Chris?
Socks, yeah.
Exactly.
No, she's my property.
But yeah, all of that stuff, like self-care and, you know, sleep is absolutely vital to it as well. Again, you know, based on my own experience. You may be a biological anomaly. You may only need 1 hour of sleep a night, and it doesn't even have to be good quality. So, you know, we can only speak for our own experience.
Oh, I just wanted to add, for those people that might not think they have anyone to speak to, there are services like in the UK, Samaritans, who are volunteers ready to pick up the phone at any time of the day, 24/7. There are people there. Definitely.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we'll obviously be including some links to mental health institutions in the description. A lot of them will be for places like the UK, Europe, Canada, and America. If you go on there and you don't see a link to, obviously it's different for every country. There are different organizations for every country. So if you don't see a link to, you know, a service in your local area, if you just go onto Google. Yeah, move country. Yeah, just come to the UK. It's great here.
It's not great.
if you just go on to Google and search for Mental Health Awareness Week, the local institutions near you that are celebrating and promoting that awareness week will pop up at the top of the list, and on there you can find links to loads of helpful things like daily routines and links to therapy centers and whatnot. I think that's it.
Yeah,
anything else to add, lads?
Positive mindset.
No.
Well, that in itself has been therapeutic for me, so I want to thank you guys
me
for
too.
your time.
Thanks,
man. It's been all right.
Yeah. Oh, depressive Darren.
Now I'm depressed.
Well, thanks to everyone for listening, and until next time, ta-ta.
Goodbye, everybody.
It's all right. You're having a human experience. There's nothing wrong with you.